afternoon, I guess now. So I filmed, or I was trying to film, all of my birth stories in one sit down. That did not happen if you saw the live from last night. So I'm here today sacrificing my nap to do the rest of the birth. So Kenzo's and Asa's birth story live. Now, like I said last night, I do have all of my birth stories on this channel. So if you go to my playlist, I already have a playlist created with all of my birth stories individually. So if you want to see like everything that happened, like all the details, you can check out that playlist. But yeah, once Asa woke up last night, it was a no-go. He just was not going to cooperate. But all the boys are in the bed right now. Saya is here on her tablet, and I'm going to try to get this done while they are napping. So this is definitely a sacrifice because I still need my naps because I'm not sleeping all the way at nighttime through the night yet. So my naps kind of help me to function in the afternoon. So yeah, like I was saying, this is probably going to be like one of my last lives. I just feel like it's too much stress to be committed to the Friday at 9. It's not working for me in my lifestyle right now. So I'll just probably try to go live whenever I can. Instead of just saying I'm going to go live on this day and then not do it and then leave you all wondering what happened. So let's start off with Kenzo. So Kenzo's birth, like I said, was my best birth. Like, it went so amazingly. For all of my children, I had a birth plan. Hey mom. I have my tripod set up, so hopefully everything goes okay. But thank you for watching and joining. I don't know if this is a good time for you all on Saturday in the afternoon like this, but yeah, we'll just see how this goes. So yeah, I had a birth plan for everyone, and for all of my births, I gave my birth plan to my doctors like ahead of time and to my support people ahead of time. And I would say for Kenzel's birth, literally everything that I had on my birth plan happened except for like one thing, and I will get to that. But I got pregnant really fast postpartum from Matthias's birth. So I was, I think, 5 months postpartum when I got pregnant with Kenzo. So it was really, really close. And again, I was breastfeeding exclusively. So, you know, that whole thing that breastfeeding keeps you from getting pregnant or keeps you from ovulating and all that, that's not true for me. It's just not true. So, yeah, because I was not really that far postpartum, and because you know, I was still breastfeeding, my doctors again were concerned about that, but there was no way I was going to stop breastfeeding a 5-month-old. Like, that just was not going to happen. I breastfed Matthias until his first birthday, and then I had what, maybe like a 2-month break, a little bit, before Kenzo was born. So anywho, Kenzo's pregnancy was I still had the morning sickness, extreme morning sickness with all of my pregnancies. So that's not something that went away. It was really, really bad for Kenzo. Like, I was on medication that time. And, but I will say, as far as like my blood pressure and everything, blood pressure was beautiful the whole entire time and the whole entire labor, which was a win for me because for my 2 previous births, I was on magnesium throughout the whole labor and process, and then afterwards. For Kenzo, I did not need it at all, and I was just so, so happy and so, so grateful, and it was definitely one of the things that made that experience for me really, really nice. Okay, so like I said, Matthias' birth was a VBAC, vaginal birth, everything went fine. And that was my plan also with Kenzo. So real supportive OBs and everything. Like, I went to an OB group, so you know, I got to meet with different physicians and whatever, and I got their support for the most part. I remember though going to one OB lady who I had met. This was my first time meeting her for this pregnancy, and first time ever, because some of the other doctors already knew me by then. They've been there with me for Saya, they've been there with me for Matthias, but this lady was new, and she was like, oh, well, you have to have a C-section. And I'm like, why? She was like, because it's only been, what are they, like 13 months apart? She was like, it's only been a few months since your last pregnancy, and you have to have a C-section because it's not safe. Now, when you have a C-section, they want you to wait at least 18 months to conceive again. And like I said, with Matthias, I got pregnant 11 months postpartum, so I was not 18 months, but I did still have a successful vaginal birth. And From there, you know, to me it was like, why are we even counting that time for my C-section when this is my third child, not my second? So the length of time between the pregnancies was even greater than 18 months. But she was just like, no, you have to have a C-section. She basically made it seem as though like if I went into labor while she was on the floor, or while, you know, she was on the clock, she was going to force me to have a C-section. And I was just like, no, there are risks for repeated C-sections. I have some videos on here about VBAC, so I'm not going to get too much into that, but I fought hard for my VBAC and I did get it. So boo, she, whatever. So anywho, I remember them, the same rules applied as last time. They wanted me to go into labor on my own. They weren't going to induce me, all that stuff, yada, 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 because of the risk of uterine rupture. Right, so I was with Kenzo. I went over by a week. My original due date was November 9th, and I remember when that day came around and I wasn't in labor, I was so upset. I was so upset. And I remember because it was just a stark difference, you know, from Saya being born super early, wasn't expecting it, but she was born. Matthias came right before his due date, and I was like, that's cool. Kenzo came a whole week after his due date, and I was just so upset. Now, I do think that my periods weren't really regular when I got pregnant with him, and I think when I had my first dating ultrasound that wasn't really that accurate either, because I feel like maybe I ovulated late or I got pregnant a week later than they said. So like, due dates are just estimates anyway, but I just wasn't expecting to go over my due date at all. I was like, that's not me, that's not what my body does. But I went a whole week over, and they did still want me to schedule the C-section. At first I was like, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it, but I did it. I was like, whatever, I'll schedule it to appease them, whatever. So they let me go a week after my due date. So I was 41 weeks. He was born November 15th. So like I said, a whole week later. I remember when his due date came, and our church was having like their church anniversary service, and I did not want to go at all, like leading up to it, but I did go because I was like, it's going to take my mind off of things. And so for that whole week until he was born, I just, you know, did all my labor prep that I normally do. I drank my red raspberry leaf tea. I was bouncing on that ball. I did my walking. I did stair walking, you know, forward, backwards, sideways, curve walking. I did all the things that I did with Matthias that really helped, you know, facilitate labor, or, you know, like jumpstart me going into labor, but none of those things worked. So it was the day of my C-section, and I was going to go in, but I told myself in my head, and I told my mom also as well, who was my doula, I was like, look, if they call me in here and act like they're going to do a C-section, but I'm in labor, or if, you know, I'm showing signs of labor and they say, you know, no, we're going to proceed with the C-section anyway, then I'm just going to walk out and leave. Like, that was my plan. But it's funny because the night before, or like the early morning of the night before, you know, I did a lot of walking on, I don't know what day it was. I can't remember exactly what day he was born, but I did a lot of walking the night before, and I was having contractions starting at like 6 in the morning of the day that I was supposed to be going in for my C-section. I remember talking to one doctor, and it's actually the doctor that delivered the baby, who was the one I wanted to deliver the baby. And I was like, well, what if I come in labor and I'm like dilated, or I'm having contractions? What would be my options then? And she was like, well, if you're a certain amount dilated and you're having consistent and steady contractions, we can give you a low dose of Pitocin to kind of like kickstart things for you, she said, but you would have to come in those conditions. So I was like, okay, fine. But yeah, 6 o'clock in the morning, I was supposed to be at the hospital at 10 or 10:30, and I think the C-section was probably scheduled for like 11. We went to the hospital, but I did start having contractions about like 6, and they were really like sporadic, like last time with Matthias. So they were like maybe 20 minutes apart, 30 minutes apart. They did start to get a little bit closer as the day went on. So my labor overall with Kenzo was really, really fast. Like, he was born that day at 7:11. So I'll never forget his time, but I can't remember the day it was. And also, while I'm talking, if you're watching, you can always stop me and ask any questions that you may have, or, you know, something that I missed or whatever. Okay. So 10:30 comes, me and my mom go to the hospital, and I'm telling her, like, I'm made up in my mind. If they don't do what I want them to do, I'm just going to leave, because they can't force me there against my will. I know my mom was a little bit nervous, but I was just set on, you know, no, we're going to do it. We're going to do it this way. So went to the hospital. Like I said, I was having steady contractions at this point, so maybe 15 minutes apart or like 7 minutes apart. they still were kind of all over the place as far as time, but I was having them. So we get there and they're like, well, you're scheduled to have a C-section. So they were just going to put me in triage and do like all of the operation prep while I was in there. And I was like, well, I really would like to try for a vaginal birth. So can I be checked? And I was like, okay, let me check with your doctor. So I'm being signed in by the nurses. I'm on the labor and delivery floor. And they're like, okay. So they talked to the doctor. I forget who was actually on at the time. Girl, I was freaking out. I know you were. My mom, she was like, she's been real supportive, but she is a nurse, like I said, so she knows the medical side of things way, way better than me. And so I could tell she was just like nervous, but she was quietly nervous. Like, you know, she supported me and what I wanted to do. And I had complete confidence in my body because, like I said, I had done it before, and I just trusted my body. And I was like, well, we'll just go with it. As long as things are going well, I'm willing to just go and, you know, see how things go. So yeah, we went in there, and the doctor checked me, and she was like, oh, well, you're 3 centimeters. So if you want, we can start giving you some Pitocin and admit you and start this labor. And I was like, yes, please. It was the music to my ears. So I was admitted. They started giving me Pitocin. And like I said, I was already having contractions, but my water hadn't broken. I forgot to mention, and I was praying. I was praying too because I was determined to have this VBAC birth. Now, the pregnancy itself with Kenzo was stressful, but uneventful as far as like any problems or issues. But the birth was just amazing. It totally made up for all of that other stuff. But, okay, so I'm admitted. I'm actually in the laboring room, on a laboring bed. Because it was, you know, because their plan was for me to have a C-section, I didn't eat, I think, the night before. And I knew you weren't joking. I was not. Like, I was like, this is what we're going to do. Boom, bam, boom. Like, if I had got to the hospital and they said, no, we cannot induce you or, you know, start Pitocin, we're just going to send you home, then I would have went home. I would have gotten in a car, went home, and waited for labor to be in a little bit more for a swing before I went back up to the hospital. So, like, waited until the contractions were intolerable or whatever. But again, I'd done it without an epidural, so I kind of knew what to expect as far as timing, and I knew I was in like early labor, but yeah, I just needed like that extra push. So anywho, we get there, we get hooked up. I got my IV, I got my saline, I got my Pitocin, and signed the papers for a TOLAC, which is trial of labor after cesarean. Signed that, you know. And basically I'm left alone. I'm left alone pretty much the whole time. I was able to move, and this was amazing. So of course I did move in my other labors, but this time I was allowed to be out of the bed because I was not on magnesium, and my blood pressure cooperated with me. So it was really, really nice just not having to worry about my blood pressure. Like, of course I will always check, you know, you have that cuff on your arm and it takes your blood pressure, you know, periodically, and I always be like, oh, I hope it stays down, I hope it stays down. And it did, and it was amazing. So I was on the ball, out of the bed. Once I was admitted, I ate for all my labors. I don't play that not eating stuff. Like, you're not gonna tell me I can't eat for the greatest physical experience of my life. Like, I'm gonna be eating. So I ate, but there was a point in a labor where I started to get nauseous and I couldn't eat. So, and I'm pretty sure that's when I was going through transition. So I got admitted to the hospital at 11. They started the Pitocin at 1. So all this time, since 6 in the morning, I was having contractions. And then once they started the Pitocin at like 1, he was born at 11. So it was like 6 hours from then. So start to finish, I would say. So that was really, really fast. What was happening? I was 3 centimeters when I came in. And once I was admitted and all that stuff, I might have been like a 4 or a 5 once they like started the Pitocin, and it went really quickly after that. I remember we were watching TV, we were just laughing and just having a good time. We were watching Grown Ups with Adam Sandler. I think it was the second one, which to me is funnier than the first one. I can't remember, but that's the one that was on TV. We were watching that, laughing, and you know, I was breathing through my contractions. I did try to get on hands and knees again, which felt good to me, but for the baby, it was making his heart rate go down. I did not know the gender, so that was really fun and exciting. And for me, it's just not knowing the gender kind of gives me that, I don't know, that mental push to be like, let's do this to see, you know, if I'm having a boy or girl. So it kind of motivates me a little bit, not knowing the gender. So yeah, just laboring, eating. I ate what I could. I had like crackers. I remember I had a banana. That banana is probably like, no, I had like a muffin. The muffin was the last thing I had. Maybe at like 3-ish or 4-ish. Yeah, once I started to go through transition, I couldn't eat because my stomach was getting queasy, but I did not throw up during this birth. So that also was another great thing. I remember though, because I didn't have, so with Saya and Matthias, because I was bedbound, I did have a catheter, you know, for using the bathroom, so I didn't have to think about that. But with Kenzo, I was able to get out of the bed, so I had to go to the bathroom every time, and I remember that just being such a nuisance to me. I was like, I gotta go pee again. Like, but of course I had to pee a lot because I was still connected to the Pitocin and the saline, so that was keeping me hydrated. I still drank, you know, water throughout, ice chips, cranberry juice or whatever. So I just remember just being annoyed with that. I was like, dang, I didn't think about this. But yeah, go to the bathroom when I needed to. I bounced on a ball. And I don't think labor really stalled. Yeah, the baby didn't like hands and knees, so I had to get off of that position. We used the peanut ball. When I was on the exercise ball, I feel like that's when I had like the strongest contractions, and I definitely, I think, was going through transition at that point. And so I was on there for maybe an hour. After that, I got into bed and we tried another position. So now at this point, I can feel the baby coming down and my body doing that automatic pushing, which is just uncontrollable. You can't really stop it. But I knew this time I didn't want to like, what's the word? I didn't want to like push even more than because I didn't want to get swollen down there. So I tried to fight it as hard as I could. I remember a nurse coming in, and I must have been on upright on the bed. So they had pushed my bed up, and I was on my knees, but I think my arms were wrapped around behind the bed or the back of the bed, which that position was really comfortable. And the nurse came in, and she was like, oh, there's this spot on your foot that you can press to relieve pain. So like acupressure, and she did it, and it was just amazing. So she waited for a contraction. She was like, let me know when you have a contraction. I was like, okay. And of course she could see it on the monitors too. But I was like, okay, I feel one coming on. And she pressed on that spot on my foot, and it's just like the pain went away. Like, I'm not even lying. I don't know what that pressure point is called, but she showed my support people how to do it, and then they did it, and it was just amazing. So that position for me was amazing because they had access to my feet. And they were able to, you know, push on that part. So, but it wasn't too long after that when I was like feeling the urge to push. Now in my birth plan, I said that I wanted to deliver, how did I say? Oh, in a squat position. So for Kenzo's birth, by then I was a doula. So in addition to my research and my experiences, I had all this new information that I wanted to use and try and all this stuff. So I was like, I want to be in a different position. There's no reason why I should be delivering or laboring on my back. For Matthias, I did deliver on my back, but by then I was so tired, and honestly, on my back was probably the most comfortable position at that point. But for Kenzo, I still had energy, and I definitely wanted to try that position out. So I remember telling them I'm feeling like I need to push, and it was like, okay. And I was like, you know, where's the squat bar? I need the squat bar. So they scrambled around to find it, which is, I guess, something that not a lot of people use, because it did take them a while to find it. But once they found it and they hooked it up to the bed, and then I, you know, put my hands on it and gripped it really, really tightly, got in a squat position. I think they probably had to help me get in that position. And then I started pushing. Like I was 10 centimeters, I guess I should say that. They did check, I was at 10. And I was like, so whenever you're ready, you can start pushing. So I started pushing. Of course, the first push or whatever was poop. And I could tell it was poop. Like, I could just feel that it was poop. So, you know, I did not care though. I had no shame or whatever. We're going to get this baby out. And to me, poop means I'm pushing right. So, you know, they wiped out the poop. Nobody made any like faces or anything like that. It's just honestly in labor, it's not something, well, for me, it's not something I really worried about. So first pushed out poop. And then I was pretty much ready to push him out. So I'm pushing. I only pushed for 11 minutes. I started pushing at 7 o'clock. He was born at 7:11, and I pushed maybe 3 times. So like I said, the first push was like poop. The second push was like his head. And then I remember the doctor saying to lean back a little bit. So I let go of the squat bar, and I leaned back, and I pushed out the rest of the body, and that was it. Like, it was amazing. It was incredible. to me, the contractions are the worst part, or I guess I should say the hardest part, or the most painful part for me. Like, I definitely did feel the ring of fire. I forgot to mention that for Matthias. I did feel the ring of fire while, you know, you're pushing the head out and you're pushing the hair out. You do feel that. But in my mind, I just tell myself, push past the pain and you'll be okay. And so that's what I did. I just pushed past the pain, pushed him out. He came out, plop, plop. I think I grabbed him. I think I got to reach down and grab him because I was so with it. I was so in tune to my body, and it was like, it was a great experience. I loved it so much. Yeah, and I just pulled him out, grabbed him, laid back, and boom, he was here. He was done. And, you know, of course they said it's a boy, which I kind of figured. I kind of figured he was a boy, and that was amazing. We breastfed right away. We had our golden hour, and all that was fun. Now, I did still tear. Oh, I still tore with Kenzo, and I think it's just because he came so fast. He came really fast. Now, with Matthias, that whole labor took like 48 hours or more, and Kenzo's birth really was like 6 hours. So he came really fast, and I think that's one of the reasons why I tore. So that sucked, and of course I had to be stitched up. And this time I was not given lidocaine, and I remember feeling every single stitch. It wasn't until recently, actually, like this year, that I went back to look at my medical records and saw that there was no lidocaine administered. And I'm just like, why? Like, I know I put in my birth my birth plan that I didn't want any medication, but I just feel like, come on, that's kind of common sense. But anywho, I felt every stitch. That was annoying. And like I said, by then, everything down there is already swollen. Everything's already in pain, so it was just like a little bit extra pain, but I had Kenzo on me at that point, and so that helped, you know, just all those hormones and endorphins kicking in after you give birth. So it wasn't that bad. It was just more of a nuisance and annoying. But once I was stitched up, I was up and walking within like 2 hours. I washed him myself. I cut the cord myself. It was just so amazing. It was such an empowering birth. And even when I think back on it, I still get really happy and excited because everything went the way I wanted it to go. Kenzo was 6 pounds, I think like 6 pounds even. And they were a little, you know, like I guess a little cautious about that, because at that point he should have been, you know, I was a week over, he should have been at least like 7 pounds or whatever. So I remember them having to take, or them wanting to take his blood sugar. So as soon as he was born, and I think like every 3 hours after that, or every time he ate, but he didn't have any issues because my milk was, it just came in right away. I never really had any issues with my milk supply. So as soon as he was eating, you know, he was fine. I just don't make big babies. He was 6 pounds, and that for me was normal. So yes, great birth, great recovery. As far as recovery wise, was really easy. So I knew how to like treat my body afterwards, even though I tore, like how to walk, how to sit, and how to lay down and things like that. So the recovery wise was easy. I think, yeah, my easiest birth, fastest birth, and easiest postpartum recovery. So that was Kenzo. And now we're at Asa. So Asa's birth did result in a C-section. And I'm still not sure why. Like, I have some guesses to why, but I still don't know why. But yeah, still plan on having a vaginal birth with him. Still did like all the things that I did with Matthias and Kenzo. But let's see. So Kenzo, Asa got pregnant with him 18 months postpartum. So he was like my biggest gap. So I was at my healthiest. If you've watched any of my videos from like last year or the year before, you know, I was on my weight loss journey, just trying to lose that postpartum weight that I gained and all that stuff, and then got pregnant with him. So, you know, I still maintained my fitness and exercising and all of that, just lowered the intensity and the frequency and things like that. But I still just tried to make sure that I was, you know, preparing myself for labor. So I did all the same things, you know, drinking the tea, bouncing on a ball. And for Asa, his due date was March 8th. And he was born March 2nd. So what happened with him, and like I said, for all of my pregnancies, I was considered high risk just because of the preeclampsia and the C-section, and also for me just having a history of small babies, I guess from my gestational age. So he was diagnosed with IUGR, which say it was also as well. And I can't remember what week they officially diagnosed me with that. It had to be after 20 weeks because it wasn't really a problem or concern about his size. But as the pregnancy went on, he was growing, but not like, you know, as I guess equivalent to the weeks gestation I was. And I'm pretty sure his due date was correct. Like I was having regular cycles and periods at that time. So anyway, I was 39 weeks and a few days, maybe 39 weeks exactly. And they had wanted to just do a C-section right off the back, I think. No, yeah, same rules applied as for my other VBACs. Like I had to go into labor on my own, this, that, and another. But because this time he was growing slowly or growing slower than they wanted to see, then they wanted me to deliver by my due date. Like they weren't trying to let me go a week past like they let me do with Kenzo. So that was a big area of concern. It was a big stressor towards the end because I was going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with the head doctor. And she basically was trying to make it seem like, no, this is what you're going to do. And if you don't do this, then we're not going to support you. Like she was like, we had a meeting, this, that, and another. Like same woman that tried to scare me before with Matthias, the same woman. So I was like, okay. And at the end, I just had to leave it in God's hands. Like whatever you want to happen will happen. I just set myself up for a vaginal birth and do all the things, you know, that I've done before. So so at this point with Ace's birth, I'm having the Dopplers. They wanted me to come in 2 times a week. I told them that was too much for me. I was like, I have 3 children at home. I cannot be up here 3 and 4 times a week. Like, it's just not going to happen. So I went once a week for the Dopplers, and once I had my Dopplers, I had a non-stress test too. So I had those every single week towards the end, a growth scan every 6 weeks, and I also had, you know, where they would check like the fluid around baby, where they would check the function of the placenta and the blood flow and all of that stuff. So Asa always did well with the NSTs. He always did well with the Dopplers. What happened was I went to one of my ultrasound visits, and they noticed when they measured the fluid that some of the fluid was like leaking out, or that there wasn't enough fluid around the baby. So I remember, you know, they said something, or the lady that did it said something. She was like, but I'm kind of new at this. So I'm not sure if what I'm seeing is the right thing. I'm going to bring someone else in to do the fluid measurements and see if they're seeing the same thing. So someone else came in and they measured, and they were like, yeah, there's not enough water around the baby. So then, of course, I'm like, oh my gosh, now what? So then I go sit down with a doctor or the specialist, and she comes in and she recommends induction because they were saying, because he was growing small. Now, I didn't know the gender. It's another surprise gender. So because he was already growing small, and because I had a history of preeclampsia, they wanted me to be induced. Now, I did not have any blood pressure issues with Asa either. Like my blood pressure stayed pretty good throughout and through the labor as well. So even through the labor, I didn't have to have magnesium, which was also another good thing because magnesium is just, it's the worst. But you know, it's necessary. It did serve its purpose. So they was like, we want you to be induced. And she talked to me for a while, but she was really, really sweet about it. Like she told me the pros and cons. She told me what would happen, you know, if I continued to wait or if we did it right away. And I just had to weigh out things in my head. I was like, well, I know I'm full term. We can try it. You know, I went home and talked to my mom, talked to my other support people to see, you know, just to kind of help them, or so they could help me process my thoughts. And I was like, well, I think I'm going to do it. So what happened was, or what they think happened, is that my my water was leaking and I didn't know it. So that was like, I don't know, I feel like it was a Tuesday. I feel like everything, no, it had to be a Monday. So that was like on a Monday. And it was like, well, maybe it started leaking over the weekend. So basically, once your water breaks or once your water starts leaking, they want you to deliver within about 24 hours, because once that fluid is not around the baby, then you run the risk of infection, which, long story short, I did get an infection. So, or I started to show signs of an infection at the end, and that's one of the things that led to my C-section. So they weren't sure how long my water had been broken, and they just were concerned about the amount of fluid available to the baby. So I decided to do the induction. And again, they wanted me to go upstairs right away, like right then and there. And I was just like, no, I'm not doing that. I had to get my kids situated. I had my bag packed and everything, but I was like, I want to see them and, say goodbye to them and all that stuff. So I went home, ate a little bit, tried to take a nap. I literally could not take a nap because I was just so, I don't know, anxious or whatever. And I think I went back up to the hospital at like 8 at night, 7 at night, something like that. Like I went, to say bye to the kids and got them some clothes and everything like that. And just like prepared to go back up to the hospital. So we went back up to the hospital. I was, I don't know, what was I? I'm not sure how dilated I was because I remember not needing the balloon. So I had to already be like maybe 3 centimeters or something like that because they didn't do the balloon. Or maybe they weren't going to do the balloon because of the C-section that I had previously. Like, I'm not really sure. So it started me off on a little bit of Pitocin, and I was able to move around. I ate, I drank, got in all the different positions, especially like the new ones I had learned since I became a doula and all of that stuff. And things were progressing really, really, really slowly. Like, I was in labor, or we were trying to get me in labor for at least like 24 hours. And I got to 5 and kind of just stayed there. Like, I got to 5 and then that was it. They put the Pitocin, like, they increased it slowly, slowly, slowly. And then when it didn't seem like it was working, they turned it down. At one point, they turned it off. Then they turned it back on and tried to increase it. So it went up like to the max that they were comfortable with giving me a few times, but it just didn't seem like the baby was coming down. Like, in my body, I could tell that something was wrong. Like, it didn't feel like it was descending. And every time they would go to check me, I'm like, I hope I'm dilated, but I just kind of knew in my heart that I wasn't. And so I remember one nurse came in, and this is towards the end, and she was like, oh, you're at a 5. And I could tell she was so excited because she was like, yeah, you're at a 5. But I knew in my head they had told me that like 12 hours ago or 15 hours ago. So I was not dilating. And I don't know what happened. I don't know if he had like a short cord, if he just wasn't in the right position. But we did literally every position you could think of. We did the peanut ball a couple of times. I got out the bed on the exercise ball. I was standing with the exercise ball on the bed and, just swaying side to side. We did flying cowgirl pose, which is supposed to like really open up your hips. I was on my knees. We did everything. It was kind of hard to track ASA during the labor. So I remember they inserted an internal monitor, which I hated. I hated that so much. And it's like a long wand. But it was just annoying because it was like, I don't know, I could feel it every time I moved. But they wanted to pick up the contractions because I guess it wasn't showing so good on like the regular fetal monitors that you have on your belly. So they did an internal one. And that I remember being so annoying. But yeah, things just were not moving along, and they didn't want to keep me on the Pitocin for too long. And because, like I said, they didn't know when my water had broken, so this is going into like day 3 or 4 of my water being broken. And the doctor that I had was real nice, real friendly, and basically they were like, as long as baby is tolerating labor well and you're tolerating labor well, we'll continue to try for this vaginal birth. But the moment the baby starts showing signs or you start showing signs, then we're going to do the C-section. So everybody was really patient. I had this one nurse who was so wonderful. I can't remember her name, but she was amazing. And yeah, everybody did the best they could. I did the best I could. My support people did the best they could, but it just was not to be. And towards the end, my blood pressure started to go up a little bit, and I started to get a fever. And I had this massive headache, like it hurt so, so bad. And those were like all the signs of an infection. And, I don't know, my water broke on like Friday or Saturday. They asked me when I came in if I felt, like water leaking or anything. And I'm like, no, not like any more than normal. But so yeah, I don't know how long it had been broken, but by then my body was just exhausted. I definitely could tell that my uterus was exhausted. Like, I was on a Pitocin, and my contractions, like, naturally, I guess, are not really that strong. And so Pitocin helps me to have stronger contractions to where they're effective to push the baby down. But when they returned, the Pitocin off, my own contractions were not really that strong, and they felt like it was like putting too much stress on my uterus, which it definitely was. I would say towards the end I was having maybe like 3 to 4 minutes apart, and then but when they would turn it off, the contractions would get further apart again, and they weren't strong either. So things just weren't going. And then once I started showing signs of infection, they were like, I think it's time for us to do the C-section. And by then, like, you know, a few hours before that, I had made my peace with it. I was like, they kept coming back, and I was only at 5. I was at 5 centimeters and I think 80% effaced. I wasn't even at 100% effaced, and it just was like, it wasn't going to work this time. And I was completely okay with that, because I was like, whatever is going to be the safest for me and the baby, you know, that's what we're going to do. Like I said, the contractions were probably like on an 8, but I could tell in my body that I wasn't feeling that pressure, like really low. My body wasn't doing the pushing, and I just could tell kind of that he was stuck some way, somehow. This wasn't going to happen. So I signed the paperwork. I made my peace with it. I did cry, of course, because that's not what I wanted. And having a C-section and recovering at home when you have other children at home to take care of is so hard. It was so hard. It still is a little bit hard. So yeah, but I still was happy. You know, I went through it, and I was like, it wasn't going to work. That's okay. I was able to walk down to the operating room, which I thought was really cool. So I was like, that was really cool. I was still with it. I was still able to talk and everything. Like I said, I had the headache, but other than that, it was okay. Once I signed the papers for the C-section, I had to take this drink, that nasty drink again, that you have to take before your C-section, which I think neutralizes your stomach acids. And like I said, I was eating, but I stopped eating at a certain point because I was like, I think this might result in a C-section. So I just wanted to make sure I was safe on that end. So it might have been maybe 12 hours since I had last eaten something. But that drink was just, it's so disgusting. I drank maybe half of it, and then I threw it up. It was so disgusting. So we went down, all walked down. They turned the Pitocin off. I had my little slippers or my little socks on, and they put me up there, and it just wasn't a scary experience. Like Wasaya, everything was so scary. Everything was so bright. Everything was just like, oh, I don't know how this is going to go. But this time it was nice. It was really calm and cool. I had the same anesthesiologist that I have Wasaya, so I'm like, that's my guy, because, you know, everything, he did everything wonderfully with Saya, so I completely trusted him. I had the spinal. So for Saya, I had the spinal just because they had to get her out as quickly as possible. And to my understanding, the spinal works faster than an epidural. Like, I think it takes like 20 minutes for the epidural to kick in. So I had the spinal with Saya. And then I requested the spinal with Asa just because that's what I knew. So I was like, can I have that? Is that going to be a problem? He was like, oh yeah, sure, we can do that. So that to me didn't really hurt. Like, you feel like a little pinch. They must give you like a little bit of numbing before they do the spinal. So you feel a little pinch, and you know, you're hunched over. And that went off without a hitch. They laid me back. And then I felt my legs get warm, and to me it's like a really great feeling. Like, it just feels like stepping into a nice warm bath. This time my arms were not pinned down, and I don't know if that's because they forgot or because, you know, things changed, but I didn't say nothing because I was like, look, if they don't have to, I'm not even going to remind them. I remember though, I still was feeling queasy and nauseous at this time, so I let them know that, and they gave me the medicine through the IV, which did work, but I feel like not as fast as Wasaya because I did throw up. Like, and I knew I was going to throw up, so I turned my head to the side and I threw up right on the floor. I did not care. I'm always throwing up. I did not care. I threw up all that stuff that they gave me to neutralize my stomach, and whatever. It just, whatever. Okay, so, you know, I had my C-section, and we didn't know the gender again. So once they pulled out the baby, they're like, it's a boy. And I was like, oh my gosh. So at first, I mean, I felt like I knew it was a boy the whole pregnancy, but because things were not going my way, I was like, maybe this is a girl. Maybe this is a sign that I'm having a girl. But no, you know, Asa still was a boy. And he came out real chill. Like, he cried, but it wasn't like a screaming, you know, like Saya really screamed. He was like, okay, he cried. He was here. He made his presence. We didn't have any issues with, like, anything. So for all the other babies, they didn't need to go to the NICU or be evaluated or anything. So that was a good experience. And then, no, not yet, buddy. He's supposed to be taking a nap. So yeah, so that went off without a hitch. The sensation of a C-section just kind of feels like tugging. You shouldn't be having any pain if your medication was administered properly. So it just feels like tugging, tugging, tugging. And it didn't take too long, I feel like, to sew me back up. No, let me take that back. It did take a while because I was not clotting. Like my blood wasn't clotting. And I remember them being a little bit worried. Because I guess you got to clot a certain amount for them to sew you back up, and it wasn't. So they did give me something. I can't remember what it was, but they gave me something so that my blood would start clotting, and it took a while. So I remember them being concerned, but you know, the baby was fine on his end. They were just concerned with me, and I was completely with it. So I'm praying at this point, you know, God, let everything be okay. I don't want to go through that experience that I went through with Saya and all of that. So once they finally got my blood to clot a little bit, then they were able to sew me up. And that's it. I think they did take him to the NICU for observation, maybe, because I did want to wash him, and I think when he was taken to NICU, they washed him. So that's one of the things that I did not get for that birth. I was kind of upset about, but you know, that's okay. I've gotten to wash him plenty of times over now that he's home. So yeah, and I remember he was born in the morning. So when the C-section was called at like 5:40. No, must have been at like 5:20 when I signed the paperwork and all that stuff. And I was back in my room by 6. I think he was born at like 5:40 something. So it was really fast. C-sections are really fast. Like, it was just amazing. And you know, I'm on the good painkillers at this point. So once I went back to my room, I didn't feel any pain. All my nausea is gone, and I'm able to breastfeed him. So they brought him to me, and it was just amazing. I remember the sun was coming up, and I love looking at my birth photos that I have of his birth, because I had my golden hour, but it was literally golden time outside. Like, the sun was coming up, I could hear the birds chirping. I must have had a room like right by where the sun was rising. So I got some really good pictures and footage and videos of that moment, and it was just amazing. It was amazing. I had him on me, and versus Saya's birth, where I was just so out of it, I felt so defeated. Like, I still felt really empowered, even though it ended in a C-section. And he was 5 pounds 12 ounces, or 5 pounds and 14 ounces. 5 pounds and 14 ounces. He was almost at that 6-pound mark, just a few ounces off. And he was born maybe 4 days before his due date. So he was born March 2nd. Yeah, and his due date was March 8th. So that is all of my birth stories. They progressively got better, and even though, like I said, even though the last one resulted in a C-section, I still feel really happy and proud about that birth. So I finally made it through this video for you all. I hope that you enjoyed it. Let me know if you guys have any questions that I may have left out. I feel like there is something. So, like, my water broke for pretty much all of my births. No, for Kenzo's it did not break. For Kenzo's, they broke my water, and then the contractions were definitely more stronger after that. But like I said, overall, that labor was really fast. But yes, that's all my birth stories in my live video. So if you have any questions of anything I left out, you can leave that in the comments below. And if you want to see, like, specifically everything, because in my birth stories, I'm really detailed about everything. So those are in my birth stories playlist. Thank you all for watching. If you're watching now, or if you're watching on the replay, I appreciate it. And I will try to do lives pretty much whenever I can. So I guess when my life gets a little bit more structured, then I can pick like a day and time. But for right now, I just hop on here when I can. And of course, I'll still do my weekly videos, but seems like they're up. But thank you all for watching. I hope that you all enjoy your Saturday, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.